Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Dharma family service. This is the last Dharma family service in April. It's very nice to have you here today, whether you're in person or online. We'd like to begin the service with Sutra chanting. So we will be chanting Juseige on page 23 in the small purple book. Namanda, 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 namanda. Gagon chosegan hishimu jodo shigan fumanzok seifu joshogak gao muryoko Fuidai seshu Fusai shobingu Seifu joshogak Gashi jobutsudo Myosho chojipo Kukyomi shomon Seifu joshogak Ryokujin shonen Joe shubongyo Shigumu jodo Isho tenin shi Jinniki and Aiko Fushomu saido Shoujo sankumyo Kosai shuyakunan Kai chi egen Meshi kon moan Hei soku sho akudo Tsudatsu zen shumon Koso jo manzok Iyoro jippo Nichigatsu shujuki Tenko onpugen Ishikai hozo Koseku dokuho Jodai shuchu Seppo shishiku Kuyoi saibutsu Gusoku shutoku hon Gane shitsu joman Tokui sangai yo Nyobutsu mugechi Tsudatsumi fusho Gangaku erik Toshi saisho son Shiganya koka Daisen okando Kokusho tennin Touchin myoke Shin Ojo An Nako. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda. Thank you. I didn't mean to throw you a curveball there with the. If you were watching the screen, it says Namo Amida Butsu at the end, but I was doing the Namandabu. So if you're looking at the book, I was doing what you saw. But if you're online or if you were looking at the screen, it was a little bit different. Next, we'd like to recite the three treasures, which is on page 3 in the small purple book. The three treasures. Hard is it to be born into human life, now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the Buddha Dharma, now we hear it. If we do not deliver ourselves in the present life, no hope is there that we shall be freed from suffering and sorrow in the ocean of birth and death. Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in Buddha. May we all together absorb into ourselves the principle of your way to enlightenment and awaken in ourselves your supreme will. I take refuge in Dharma. May we all together be submerged in the depth of the doctrine and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. I take refuge in Sangha. May we all together become units in true accord in your life of harmony, in a spirit of universal oneness, freed from the bondage of selfishness. Even through myriad ages of kalpas, hard is it to hear such an excellent, profound, and wonderful doctrine. Now we are able to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of the Tathagata's teaching. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda. Okay, thank you. Give me just a second. The filter was working extra hard because of the incense. I think so. All right, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Let's see. So I kind of want to continue on from what I did last week. And last week, if you remember, I talked about what do we do, right? What do we do here as Buddhists here at Buddhist Church of Oakland? So today I thought I'd talk a little bit, what do we believe? All right, so last week was what do we do, right? There's kind of actions, practice. And then this week, thought I'd just kind of address kind of a flip side maybe, or two wings of the bird, right? So in addition to what we do, what do we think? What do we believe? And I'm not going to be able to cover everything. Well, I could. No, I couldn't actually. And I could try, and it would take hours and hours. We're not going to do that. But I would like to look at this a little bit. So I'd like to start with a quote. Why don't we please join me in Gassho? We are the same. There is no difference anywhere in the world. People are people. They laugh, cry, feel, and love. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo. Okay, so first question, not so much from the quote we were just doing, but when I say, what do we believe? I kind of wanted to ask, well, who is we? What's the we that I'm talking about, right? And so first answer is just Buddhists. So maybe we as Buddhists, what do we believe? Okay. Another, maybe more specifically for myself, certainly, in Buddhist Church of Oakland, the we, maybe more specifically, Jodo Shinshu Buddhists. Or we could just call it Shin Buddhists, right? That's what we are as members of Buddhist Church of Oakland, right? There's Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. So, that answer might be different than a Zen Buddhist or Tibetan Buddhist or all the other kinds of Buddhism. There's so many, right? And so in one way, there's, I think, a lot shared as Buddhists, but then also this question of what do we as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists believe? So generally, I think most general answer, what do we believe? So if someone comes up to you and says, oh, you're Buddhist? What do you believe? Right? One thing you can say, oh, I believe in the teachings of the Buddha. It's a very general answer, right? But that's kind of it in a lot of ways. As a Buddhist, I believe in what Buddha taught. Now the problem is, they say 84,000 teachings, right? So what Buddha taught is a whole bunch of different stuff. Right? Because Buddha wasn't a systematic teacher. He didn't start on day one, I've got a 50-year lesson plan. And we're going to start on day one. Day two, we're going to build on that. Day three, we're going to do more, right? That's a lot of times how we learn, right? And if you go to school, that's how they try to teach it, right? Start with the basics and then build, build, build. That's not how Buddha taught. Buddha taught each person individually, right? And so one person had an issue or a problem or a question, Buddha answered the way they needed, what they needed to hear. The next person asked a totally different question, totally different set of issues, and he taught something else. Sometimes they contradict each other, right? And so we get this huge range of teachings. And then Buddhism changes over time, and there's different interpretations. But generally, I think one answer, what do we believe? We believe in the teachings of Buddha. And so some of those general ones, well, another way we can answer this is the Buddha Dharma. So remember in the Three Treasures, the part that I read, hard is it to be born into human life, now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the Buddha Dharma, now we hear it. The Buddha Dharma, this word Dharma is an Indian word, and it can mean teachings. So it's kind of just another word for teachings in a way, but it's also the truth as Buddha awakened to. Right? The truth that we have in Buddhism, which might be different than other religions. Right? It might be different than society. Right? It might be different than the laws that various countries have. Right? But for us, the Buddha Dharma, right? This truth that Buddha awakened to, and these teachings of the Buddha. So one of them, karma. You've heard that word, right? It's kind of become an English word, even if we don't know what it means when we say it, right? I immediately think, my karma ran over your dogma, right? Bumper sticker, right? But karma really means cause and effect. Okay? Or maybe we could say action and result. So karma is this kind of theory of action. And it says that when I do something, there's a result. And then often, the next thing that I do might be influenced by the result, because it's a result of a previous action. So if I indulge in a life of desire, right, that's going to result it's going to have maybe specific results, and it might kind of snowball too, where that's all I can do. Or if I live a life just full of anger and hatred, right, I'm always angry. Maybe things will start making me angry that wouldn't have before, but I'm just so used to being angry, it's almost like habit, right? It's kind of habit energy. Okay? So karma is one of them, and then connected to it is interdependence. I think we're used to hearing that one. I was going to do impermanence, interdependence, but I changed my mind, because karma, I think, is important in Buddhism, recognizing that my actions have results. My actions have impact. And a lot of times what I do is because of the actions and reactions of mine and my experiences from the past. Interdependence is maybe a little bit different. Part of it is nothing exists in and of itself. Everything exists in relation to everything else. So a lot of times I think we think of like the pen, right? And I'm going to describe the pen. And I've been saying this recently, right? It's only a pen if I write with it. If I use it to scratch my head, it's not a pen anymore, it's a head scratcher. Right? So the essence of the pen, what is it? Well, it kind of depends on how it's being used. Right? So that the pen requires other things, the things around it, the things in relation to it, for it to truly be a pen. I can use it to scratch, or I can use it to, it could be a door opener. I don't want to touch the door, so I push the door with my pen. Now it's a door opener, right? That there's no essence of pen here. It's only a pen when I write with it. What's my next slide? And so we call this, sometimes you'll hear this expression, causes and conditions, right? That things are what they are. We're here today because of causes and conditions. The other example I'd like to give is when we ask this question, who am I? Who am I? I think other religions, philosophies will say, well, I'm me, right? Especially American way of thinking, I'm me. What are you talking about? I'm me, and I'm really important, and I'm really special. And look, I'm better than you, right? And me, I. Even if I don't think to that extreme, I'm still like I, me. Well, who am I? Well, I do this, I do that. We can't even really speak without saying I. I'm hungry. I want to eat. In Japanese, you can say, onaka suita. You don't have to say, watashi wa onaka suiteiru. You can just say, hungry. But if you walk around in English and going, hungry, right? People are like, what's going on, right? You say, no, you say, I'm hungry. I want to eat, right? We can't, grammatically, we just can't exist without I. But in Buddhism, who am I? Depends on you. Depends on the circumstances around me, right? So right now, I'm Reverend Harry Gyokyo Bridge, delivering a Dharma talk because it's 10 o'clock, because people showed up, because there's people on the internet, right? Because our calendar says so and we said it a while back. Right, so because of all of these different things, right now I'm Reverend Harry. And if we'd put vacation on there, I wouldn't be Reverend Harry. I'd be Harry sitting at home, watching TV even though there's nothing on, right? Or Harry at home making breakfast, right? And then I'd be more husband, right? Or whatever, right? So depending on the causes and conditions around me, who I am kind of changes. Another way to think of it, I'm a son because of my parents. But I'm a cousin to my cousins, right? I'm not a son to them. It's different. We have a different relationship. So I'm a cousin when my cousins are in the picture, or I'm a nephew to my aunts and uncle, right? Or I'm a grandchild to my grandparents, right? Or husband, or minister, or bass player, whatever, right? Depending on who I'm interacting with, the situation, the causes and conditions, who am I is a different question, or the answer can be different. Okay, so I realized this morning, this is kind of like 5 Dharma talks squashed together. So I apologize, and I'm filling you up with too much information maybe, right? So let's go back to the question, what do we believe? And so I've given you some examples. Maybe you've heard them, right? This idea of interdependence. Right? Why should I believe it? Right? Or why should you believe it? Right? Ask yourself this question. Why should I believe this stuff? Do you believe this stuff? Right? Do you know what you believe as a Buddhist? And so, one answer would be, because I'm telling you, and I'm the minister, and I know, so I'm telling you, so you have to believe it. That's not how we work, right? That's not how it works, okay? That's dogma, right? I kind of mentioned as a joke, right? But dogma is, these are the beliefs, you must hold them, right? But to me, that's not how Buddhism works. You don't believe it because I'm telling you so. Hopefully you trust me as someone who studied this stuff, as someone who's tried to live this stuff. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe why you believe it is because you know other Buddhists, and they seem to be living life in a way that you're kind of like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's interesting. Or maybe, wow, that person's pretty special, right? So maybe I gotta look into what they believe, right, in order to kind of figure this out. So, one answer would be just belief. I believe it, right? Which is kind of nebulous, right? Maybe I believe it because I've been told it so many times and I've heard it so many times and I come to believe it. Why do we believe something? Just because we've been told? Or also, I think, because we've tried to put it into practice and found it to be true. Right? And that's a very important part of Buddhism. That is, Buddha himself said, don't believe me because I'm telling you. Believe it because you took what I said, thought about it, tried to put it into practice, tried to live it, and were like, wow, yeah, this makes sense. So that's, I think, a key part, is that it's not just kind of belief because someone said so. Faith. Right? There's another word that we're not always happy with, don't always like, to have faith, because I think a lot of times when we say faith, we think of this term, which is maybe a problematic term, but blind faith, right? Just believing, and that is the kind of thing of just believing because someone told me, and so they're an authority figure, so I believe it. But faith can mean different things, right? Faith has a lot of different aspects. Now, Buddhism does have faith, and so there's kind of an introductory level of faith, right? And so if you come and you're interested in Buddhism, then you kind of have to be like, this seems like it makes sense. I'm going to assume that what Buddha taught is true, or there's some aspect of it that it seems like maybe it's true, so I'm going to try and learn more. So that's this kind of introductory level of faith. And I think all kinds of Buddhism have that. And so this idea that, when you first hear it and you're kind of like, okay, yeah, I have to kind of assume that there's some truth here if I'm gonna follow up on it. But for us, I think there's a deeper level, taking refuge. Right? Which again, going back to the 3 treasures, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. So this idea of taking refuge is really important in Buddhism, and is one way to understand our belief. By going to the Buddha, another way to understand it is going to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha for guidance. Right? To look to the Buddha as a guide. Right? To look to the teachings of the Buddha as a guide to life. Right? Not some set of rules that I need to just follow without question, but as a guide for a way that I could live my life. Right? So this idea of refuge as guidance. There's another way to understand it. When it's raining, you look for shelter. If you don't have an umbrella, well, umbrella is portable shelter, right? An awning in front of a building is a kind of shelter, right? A tree, maybe, big tree, right? It's pouring rain, so you look for shelter. Refuge from the storm. That's Buddhism. Right? The teachings of the Buddha are a refuge from the trials and tribulations of life, the suffering of life. And then this is kind of the culmination of the whole thing. For Jodo Shinshu, Shinjin. And I gave the characters there. Shin, in modern Japanese, is just believe. Right? Shinjiru. One of my favorite expressions, Shinjirarenai. I can't believe it. Right? That's the negative. Nai is negative, right? So shinjiru is to believe. Shinjirarenai, I can't believe it. It's the potential form. It's not shinjinai or shinjitenai. It's shinjirarenai. I can't believe it. Right? So shin by itself can just mean belief. Jin, or shin by itself, here kokoro, the second character, is mind or heart. Right? So it's this mind of shin. This is the core experience of Jodo Shinshu. Okay? And I'm not going to say too much about it. You're like, this is going to be like another hour if he's going to talk about Shinjin. But I'm not going to do that to you. Okay? So it could be belief, right? Shinjiru, shinjiraranai. It could be faith. That's how it used to be translated, right? Maybe up until the 70s, 80s, they'd used faith to try and translate it. And I think they realized a lot of people don't like that word. If you see it as Christian faith, maybe, and I think kind of refugees from that, right, don't want to hear that. So the word we usually use, I think, is entrusting. To entrust in the Buddha. And maybe that goes to like what I was saying where, part of why you listen is because you know other people here, right? And so you trust that maybe there's some truth here, right? Whether you trust me because of my degrees, right? Or trust me because you've gotten to know me, right? Listen to what I had to say before, right? Or trust me because I have the robes on. There's different levels of that, why you would do that. But that entrusting, that's though entrusting in trusting a person, the teacher. But for us, this entrusting is entrusting in Buddha. So what does that mean? Okay, so what? So I just believe it, right? This is where it's really hard to explain. But yeah, I'd like to share a story. There's some ideas. There's a question even. If you had Shinjin, would you even know it? Maybe I can have Shinjin and I don't have to have an intellectual awareness of it. It's more just embodied because I go to temple a lot. I'm involved. I think about this stuff or not, at home or whatever. Actually, I think a lot of people don't really deeply intellectually engage with this stuff. They're just living their lives. But they're living lives influenced by Buddha, influenced by the Dharma, influenced by the Sangha, right? And so they've absorbed a lot of this stuff without being able to understand it. But Shinran's he's like, you need to sort this out, right? But, the other question though is this something I can do? Can I entrust in the Buddha? Is that something I can make happen? And for Shinran, I think, no, this isn't something that I make happen. It happens from Buddha. It's an experience. It's like a transformative experience. So I'd like to share a story of a member who's passed away, Sachi Matsui. She used to work at BCA bookstore like 20, 30 years ago. She, longtime member. And I was talking to her once, and she told me, she just started talking, and I've asked her family, have you ever heard this story? And they're like, no. So I'm not sure how many people know this story, but she was telling me, Sensei, I used to be so selfish. I was actually kind of mean. And I think she's talking when she was maybe college, right? A young adult. She said, I was mean, and I didn't appreciate what my family did. I didn't appreciate the sacrifices that people made, and I was very selfish. And she came to church, and then at the end of church, she walked outside, she left church, and boom, all of a sudden just light. This overwhelming sensation of light. And that's when she realized, I've been so selfish. Why am I so mean and not appreciative? And it changed her. She had this transformative experience, right? When she was shown herself, right? When she says, I was selfish, she's talking in past tense, right? She wasn't feeling that way. She was feeling entitled and correct and everything, right? But then after coming to church and having this experience of light, she changed. Her life was changed. It doesn't mean she became a perfect person, nice all the time. I've heard she could be kind of kibishi sometimes, even later in life, and but that's part of it. We're still ourselves. Shinjin doesn't mean you become awakened. It doesn't mean you become Buddha, perfect, no more problems, just nice and kind all the time. You actually become your true self, but different. You've actually experienced something other, which I would understand as Buddha's wisdom. And Buddha's wisdom is symbolized by light. Namo fuka shigi ko, right? The taking refuge in the inconceivable light of the Buddha. To me, it sounds like a mystical experience that she had, right? That she had this mystical experience. It's not necessary. We don't have to have that kind of experience, right? Like I said, I think some people just kind of come to embody it just from coming to temple, saying the name, living their lives within Buddha's light. I also have a cynical side, skeptical side, which I think I got from my father. Just like it's kind of bright outside, kind of dark in here, maybe it was just kind of dark and she walked out and the sun was shining and wow, But that could be so too, but it changed her, right? That even if it was just I can take a materialist kind of view and say, yeah, maybe it was just something that happened, just to light. So in a way, maybe she interpreted that. But what a life-changing experience, right? It didn't happen in a vacuum, I don't think. It's significant that it happened at church, right? It happened here. It might have been the old location, but it happened in this building. She was sitting in this room, right? And listening to the Dharma, and then walked outside and life changed. Seeing herself, maybe for the first time. They talk about we can't see our shadow without the sun, right? That if I'm just in a room just thinking, maybe nothing's going to happen. It's when, the light of the Dharma, being around other people, right? And also, isn't it interesting how her experience was related to her relationships, right? So it wasn't just an internal thing. It was me and everyone else, and how do I treat people? How do I live my life? Transformed by this wisdom and compassion of Amida Buddha. So, Shinjin is one of it's interesting how it's such a key, it's the fundamental core of Jodo Shinshu, it's the core experience, but we almost never talk about it because it's so hard to talk about, because as soon as I try to say, it's this, it's like, really? You're going to kind of do it? Or you should do this. It's kind of, there's no, Shinran even didn't set out, here's what you do to get Shinjin. Number 1, do this. Number 2, do this. Number 3, nothing like that. Because each of our lives is different. We have so many different relationships. So it can't be just a set dogma, right, or a set of instructions that I can give you. It's part of the life, I think, of being Jodo Shinshu. So, I wanted to go back to maybe another thing that we believe as Buddhists, or I believe as a Buddhist, and I'd like to think that as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, it's one of our core beliefs, and that's equality. So I'm switching gears here, right? Just to kind of come back to my opening quote, who I didn't say who it was by, but I was thinking about this idea of equality. Right? And America is kind of set up on supposedly democratic ideals of equality. Now, how they understood that when they wrote the various documents when we started our country were maybe different than we have now, right? And yet, I like to think that this ideal of equality, however far short we fall of it continuously, right? And yet, it's at the core. This teaching of equality, everyone equal. Now, equality could be a conceptual thing, and in terms of what really happens, maybe we don't see it happening, right? So justice is another aspect of this, right? That it can't just be an idea. But I do think that this is, for me, is an American ideal. Now, like for example, Japan is not about equality in a lot of ways. It's about hierarchy. It's built into the language, right? It's built, Confucian ideals, right, are a big part of Japanese culture. And so I don't want to be too critical, because I'm not, yeah, America's better. I cannot say that, right? And yet, it's kind of interesting to look at different cultures and look at different ways that we see equality or not. I do think Japan is ideally about equality as well. One aspect of this from Buddha's perspective, Buddhism, is that Buddha's wisdom is wisdom of non-discrimination. Right? That Buddha's wisdom sees everything as one. But also, Amida Buddha accepts you as you are. Sono mama. Right? This is part of this equality. That I don't have to feel I'm not as good as them, right? Or because I'm a certain gender or a certain age or whatever, that I'm not as high ranking as whatever, right? That in Buddhism, no, Amida Buddha, everyone equal. I mentioned it last time with Shandao, right? That Buddhism does have hierarchy built into it sometimes, the 9 grades, but Shandao says, no, those 9 grades of the best of the best and the worst of the worst, horizontal, nope, we're all in the same boat, we're all equal. Oh, so I think my next slide, I hope it comes up, is the quote. Anyone want to guess where my opening quote came from about everyone being the same? Willie Nelson, happy birthday. Yesterday was his birthday. I saw this quote and it just made me think of this stuff. We are the same. There's no difference anywhere in the world. People are people. They laugh, cry, feel, and love. And this is the part I left out at the beginning. And music seems to be a common denominator that brings us all together. Music cuts through all boundaries and goes right to the soul. So here's another view on equality, right? And just realizing, wow, there can be something like that, right? It's a long ways away, right? It seems like, often I think it seems like a pie in the sky kind of ideal, but Willie brought it to mind as I was thinking about it from a Buddhist perspective, so I wanted to put that in there. I want to thank you very much for joining us. I apologize for the 5 Dharma talks that I gave, but this, thinking about, last week, what do? We say Nembutsu, we did the Sutra chanting, we make offerings, like offering incense, we try and help out the temple. The temple gives us ways to be Buddhists together, right, with our organizations, whether it's OBWA or the host group. Thank you very much to Gary Tobinaga's host group. They've had 5 Sundays. So can we give them a hand? Thank you, yay, thank you. The refreshments and taking care, cleaning up outside and everything, right? That we have these different ways to be able to participate in the temple and thinking about what we do. But then also, this week, that what do we think? What do we believe? What is it about Buddhism? Right? And so there is a lot, Buddha's teachings, right? And then how do we do that? Whether it's taking refuge, thinking about that. Actually, Namo Amida Butsu literally means I take refuge in Amida Buddha. It has that taking refuge in it. And actually, in Sanskrit and Japanese, there's no I in there. It's Buddha telling us, take refuge in Amida Buddha. Take refuge in me. This wisdom of equality, of non-discrimination. And so I hope that this message of equality resounds, right? I feel like it has something that we have to offer to the world. So why don't we conclude with Gassho, and even though he's not, maybe he is a Buddha, I don't know, but Willie Nelson, in honor of his birthday, which was yesterday, I'd like to read this passage once again, and I'll read the whole thing. We are the same. There is no difference anywhere in the world. People are people. They laugh, cry, feel, and love, and music seems to be the common denominator that brings us all together. Music cuts through all boundaries and goes right to the soul. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Okay. Kind of ironic that we don't have music today, but that's okay. I would like to just do a couple of announcements. Big one, bazaar. We are going to do a bazaar. It's going to be one day, Saturday, June 17th. So that's Father's Day weekend, but we're giving the fathers a day off on Sunday. But we do need help on that Saturday, June 17th. We're still preparing for it, but the main thing is we do need volunteers. And so if you are interested, you can volunteer for Friday, Saturday, either one or both if you can. And please contact the office. Right, the information is on the website, or John Takagaki, who's here today. So if you're here today and you want to volunteer and you haven't already, talk to him. Another interesting announcement is today is actually the last day of our mask requirement. And so starting tomorrow, we'd like to move into kind of a new phase. And so they will no longer be required. We still recommend them, though, depending on the circumstances. Right? And so it is kind of an issue of, thinking about yourself, also thinking about others. We do have a wide range of, our Sangha is made up of individuals from little babies all the way up to, I think 102 is the oldest that we have. And so we'd like to just recommend them as a safety measure. So that should do it. Thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we conclude our service with Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda. Okay, thank you. Actually, I do have music, but it's pre-recorded, so I'm going to play it. Take it away, Steve. pussycat. Buddha loves you, pussycat. Mew, 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 mew. Swim, swim, little fish. Buddha loves you, little fish. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Bye, everybody.